everyone, and welcome to the Dill Pickle Movie Network. I am Dylan Randazzo, and I'm here today to give you four mini reviews for movies that came out in February of 2021 on Netflix. Now, many of you are wondering, it's 10 days into March, Dylan, why are you making a video this late about last month? And the truth is, I wanted to put this video out last week, but of course with the Golden Globes, with the release of Paramount Plus, with Coming to America coming out, and me putting out 2 episodes of 2 different podcasts last week, it became a bit crowded. So this week I really wanted to spotlight these 4 films on their own, instead of grouping them all up with that whole mess of things going on last week. The 4 films I will be talking about that debuted on Netflix in February are Malcolm and Marie, Animals on the Loose, a You vs. Wild movie, I Care a Lot, and To All the Boys, Always and Forever. Now, if you haven't seen all these movies, I will keep it spoiler-free, but I urge you to check them out. Some movies may appeal to you more than others, some appealed more to me than others, but I do think there's a lot to get from each of these movies, and some criticisms I have for each one of these movies. Starting with Malcolm and Marie, I feel like this has been a very divisive film on the internet because a lot of people are either really loving it or really hating it. I'm somewhere in the middle. I don't really hate it, I don't love it, I have issues with it, but I also think that it has a lot of merits. This is a film directed by Sam Levinson, who you might know as the creator and director of Euphoria. Euphoria is a huge series starring Zendaya, who also stars in this film, and has really gotten a great following over the past few years. It won the Emmy Award for Best Actress for Zendaya. This film also stars John David Washington, and the film centers around this couple coming home from a premiere. Malcolm is a director who is awaiting the first critic review of his film. I think it is an interesting film to watch as someone who is pursuing movie criticism because, you know, it obviously has a lot to say about critics. As an actor who is also kind of a critic, I understand that frustration of being an actor and having frustrations with critics, not liking your performance or not liking the thing you produced, your art, your films, your anything. I get it. I totally get it. And so I actually thought this film had a lot of interesting things to say about that, on that respect. The reason I didn't love this film, though, is because so much of the film was rooted in arguments and arguing, which could be powerful if it is this climactic build-up to an argument. But the thing is, it seemed like every few minutes there was another argument and things really escalated, and they kind of stayed there and plateaued the whole rest of the movie. I would have rather seen a little bit of an ebb and flow with these arguments because they are so heavy, and it does make the film really emotionally and physically draining and exhausting to watch when you're watching this couple just fight it out every single few minutes. I feel like the film just didn't do a good enough job making me care about their relationship. While they were fighting, I was never really rooting for them to resolve things because I didn't care enough about their relationship. And I think if their relationship, Malcolm and Marie's relationship, had been established earlier on and more fleshed out and given some more moments of levity and breathing room and positivity, those moments where it got darker would have hit harder. That being said, Zendaya and John David Washington are giving 2 of their best performances ever. I have not seen Euphoria, but I've seen Zendaya in other things, and I really like her as an actress, and this is, I think, her best performance. John David Washington, I could say BlacKkKlansman might be my favorite performance of his, but this is definitely a close runner-up. I think he is absolutely excellent in this film. They take material that I didn't really love, but really elevated it because of how good they are as actors. I just wish there was more of that positive chemistry so that I cared about the couple a little bit more. I also really enjoy the cinematography. I think it is beautiful to the eye. There's lots of great framing in this film. There's a lot of really interesting use of light. Filming the entire movie in black and white was very interesting. Like I said, there's a lot to like in this movie, but I feel like the overall picture was slightly underwhelming for me. The second movie I'm going to be talking about is Animals on the Loose, a You vs. Wild movie, directed by Ben Sims and starring everyone's favorite survivalist, Bear Grylls. Now, as a kid, I loved watching Bear Grylls. Man vs. Wild was one of my favorite shows to watch, especially with my brother. We would go in the backyard when we were like 10 or 12 years old and film our own Man vs. Wild videos in our little neighborhood. We lived on a river, and we would literally swim in the river and film ourselves eating bugs and plants in the backyard. It was gross, but it was fun as little kids to like have this nature wild man aspect. I think we called the show Wild Man. So naturally, I was excited that this was a full-length movie, movie, all these animals escape from this wildlife sanctuary, and you basically have to track down these animals and find them. It's almost like a video game in the fact that you get to pick where Bear Grylls goes next. It's kind of like Black Mirror's Bandersnatch, where you choose your own adventure, essentially. You can tell Bear Grylls, hey, you should swim across that river, or hey, you should climb across that mountain. You get to tell him what to do. You get to tell Bear Grylls whether or not you want him to eat the sweet fruit or eat a disgusting little bug. I have a feeling I know which one the kids will pick for that one. I think it's a really fun experiment. If you want to just kill an hour's time, I think it is much more geared towards kids. From the very get-go, there is a shot that makes it very clear that this is more geared toward a younger audience, because it's clear from the start that this isn't really necessarily the most realistic of Bear Grylls' adventures. I think this is geared towards a younger audience, but I did have fun with it, and I think there is an audience out there who will have a blast with this film. The next film I will be talking about is I Care a Lot, directed by Jay Blakeson. Now, this has been getting a lot of attention, especially since Rosamund Pike won her Golden Globe for this performance. Now, first off, it was nominated in the Best Comedy or Musical category, and I will be clear from the start, this is a dark comedy. This is not your laugh out loud. This is not Borat or Palm Springs. No, this is a very dark comedy. This is about a crooked legal guardian played by Rosamund Pike who basically manipulates elderly people into nursing homes and then drains their accounts for money and basically uses that money for herself. It's a very crooked premise. She attempts to swindle out Jennifer Peterson, played by Diane Wiest, and Jennifer Peterson has a little bit of a secret that might make Rosamund Pike's job just a little bit harder. Now, a lot of people have had criticisms for this movie because they find that it's hard to root for the main character, but I think this movie makes it very clear from the get-go that you should not be rooting for Rosamund Pike's character. I actually found it refreshing that the main character of this story was the villain. You're not rooting for her to succeed, you're rooting against her. You're rooting for her to fail, and in rooting for her to fail, you're that much more invested into the story and into all the different plans of action she makes. And I won't spoil whether or not she succeeds or fails, but it's a lot of fun watching and hoping to see her fail. I don't think necessarily the main character of your story needs to be the protagonist, and in this case, it's clearly not. I think this is a really stacked cast all around. Obviously, Rosamund Pike and Diane Wiest, like I just said, are really, really solid, but you also have Peter Dinklage, Isaac Gonzalez, Chris Messina, who is only in a few scenes, is really, really solid. This is a really great cast that brings a lot of good energy, good mystery to the plot. Every character has their own flaws, but because of these flaws, it feels realer to the viewer, and it just makes you more fascinated to see exactly how this story will pan out. It really questions morality and what is right, what is wrong, who you should be rooting for, who you should be rooting against. Is there really a hero in this story? And at the end of the day, there might not be, and that's okay. I thought it was a very interesting story because of it. Stylistically, I think it's well shot. I think it's a well-made thriller as is. I think the tension is built in the right places. It has the great payoffs. A little bit of the third act gets a little messy. It derails a little bit. There are some really big conveniences that happen. For example, there's a scene where two characters escape out of their house, and mere seconds later, the whole place explodes. It's very convenient at times, but I do think it sticks a landing and really was a crowd pleaser that I showed my parents a few days later after watching it for the first time and just had as much fun the second time as I did the first time. I hate using the word fun because the premise is so dark, but there is an element of fun to the mystery and the action of it. I think Rosamund Pike is deserving of all the nominations she's getting. I think she is incredible in this role. One of my favorite roles of her is in Gone Girl. It was a film I saw. It was my introduction to Rosamund Pike, and I had never seen her before, and she was just absolutely incredible. To see her as another lead of a movie where she is not necessarily the hero, and she is very clearly the villain in this film, I thought it was just super interesting, and I think she is going to be one of my favorite modern movie villains of the past few years because her character is unlike anything we've seen before. I just really, really, really dug this movie. I get it's not for everyone. There is not really a ton of rooting interest in this movie. Everyone has their flaws, but I do think just out of sheer curiosity and mystery and intrigue, I was fully in it the entire way through. So I do recommend this. It does have some sensitive topics, about nursing homes and about corrupt, guardianship. It is an issue that I didn't know existed, but I'm sure does exist in places around the world. So I do think it can be a little sensitive at times, especially if you have had experiences with nursing homes, with guardianship, but I do think it is a film that really, really worked for me. The last film we're talking about is To All the Boys, Always and Forever, directed by Michael Fimignari. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. This is the third film to the To All the Boys franchise. It just feels like we just got the second film last year because, well, we did. The second and third films were filmed right back to back, so we're literally picking up right where the last movie left off, and I haven't been the hugest fan of these movies. I mean, these movies weren't really necessarily made for me. I've enjoyed them, but more for their aesthetic and their style than the actual contents of the story itself. But I thought this story in particular was the most interesting to me and felt the most honest and most real. This story is centered around Lara Jean, played by Lana Condor, who is just amazing, by the way, in this role. I think she is the highlight of all three of the movies. But it's about Lara Jean trying to make the choice of where she wants to go to college and having to factor that into her relationship with Peter, played by Noah Centineo, and really put this whole long distance thing to the test. It's an interesting dilemma that I think a lot of people go through that isn't seen enough on film. I think this is a really honest portrayal of this dilemma, and it never once passed judgment on people who do decide to break up for long distance or who decide to stay together and try long distance out. I think it's a really good exploration on long distance relationships. What I really liked about this movie, first and foremost, is that it is Lara Jean's story. This is about her decision and her finding herself and where she wants to go to college. Sure, there are elements of this relationship, and the relationship is a huge part of it, but it is not the main focus. The relationship is not the main focus of the movie like the first two were. The first one being them getting together, and then the second one being this love triangle. The third movie is really about Lara Jean and her own personal journey. It's just that this relationship is a factor of that journey, and that's kind of why I appreciated this the most of the three. I think we really get to see Lara Jean as an individual and as an independent person the most in this film, because she ultimately stands by her decisions, and I really, really appreciated that. As someone who just recently graduated from a college in New York during a pandemic, I mean, this movie was kind of emotional. There are scenes where Lara Jean is falling in love with New York City for the first time, and it really brings me back to my first time going to the city as a college student and really taking in all the city has to offer. It is a really beautiful moment when you're experiencing your future home for the first time and really seeing it with your eyes for the first time in its rawest and most beautiful form. And I think it was actually touching. It made me almost get a little teary-eyed to see, this character fall in love with a city that I've fallen in love with and that I have a personal attachment to. I thought it was a beautiful way to end this trilogy. I was not a huge fan of the first two, but I think this one is definitely the strongest, and this one I would actually recommend. Even if you haven't seen the first two, all I think you need to know before going into this is that she is in this long-term relationship with Noah Centineo's character, and that's all you really need to know, is that they're in a relationship. I think everything else that comes, I mean, there are elements tying back to her relationship with her mother, which is explored in the first two films, but I think you really don't need to see the first two films to still relate to the circumstances and to the emotions that these characters are feeling in this film. So those are the 4 movies that I saw on Netflix. I hope you check them out. Some of them might be for you, some of them might not be for you, but I think all of them have their own merits that are worth exploring. What were some movies you watched on Netflix last month? Were they these 4? Were there some others? What are some series you watched on Netflix? I'm always looking for good series recommendations. I'm a movie guy, but I love TV as well. So please let me know in the comments what you're checking out on Netflix and what you want me to see me review for March's Netflix review. That's all I have for now. You can check me out here on the Dill Pickle Movie Network. I post new videos every single week, including a weekly podcast every Monday called Marvelous Movie Mondays. We are now in the off season between WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and we are doing a villains ranking next Monday. And we just dropped our first episode of another podcast I am doing, The Great American Film Off with Crosby Rosa. We talked about what movie makes you cry the most. We had a nice battle between Brokeback Mountain and Toy Story 3, and next week we will be doing another show focusing on what the best mid-2000s to mid-2010s DreamWorks film is. That's right. Is it Over the Hedge? Is it Madagascar? Flushed Away? Kung Fu Panda? How to Train Your Dragon? There are a lot of good choices, so please sound off on what you want to see us talk about then. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.